Plenty of women came into Elvis Presley's life, but only one seemed to affect him in a way that was truly different. From the moment Anne Margaret arrived on the set of Viva Las Vegas, everyone around them noticed a connection that felt far too genuine to be simply acting. The whispers began almost immediately, and decades later, Anne Margaret's own words would only deepen the mystery. Because behind the music, the fame, and the Hollywood glamour was a side of Elvis that very few people ever had the privilege of witnessing. Her story begins on April 28, 1941, in a small town nestled deep in northern Sweden, so close to the Arctic Circle that winter seemed to stretch on forever. That was where Anne Margaret Olsen entered the world. Long before the Hollywood lights, the sold-out performances, and the screaming crowds, she was simply a little girl growing up in a quiet corner of the world, completely removed from the spotlight that was waiting for her. Her father, Gustav, had already developed a fondness for adventure. He had spent a period of his life living in America before eventually returning to Sweden to settle down and build a family. But after Anne Margaret was born, that pull toward the United States came rushing back with renewed force. There was one significant obstacle. His wife had no desire to leave Sweden behind. So Gustav made the difficult choice to go alone, crossing the ocean in search of a better future while his family remained behind. For several years, they lived divided by distance and uncertainty. Then, when Anne Margaret was 6 years old, her mother finally gathered their belongings and brought her daughter to America to...
Once the family had settled into life in Chicago, Anne Margaret threw herself into dance lessons with complete dedication. It quickly became apparent that she possessed something extraordinary. Even as a young child, she could observe a routine once and reproduce it with near-perfect accuracy, as though her body naturally understood movement in a way others simply did not. Behind the scenes, her mother worked tirelessly, sewing every costume by hand so her daughter could continue performing and pursuing her passion. Then life delivered a sudden and painful blow. Her father, who worked for a local electrical company to support the family, suffered a serious workplace accident that left him permanently unable to return to work. Overnight, the family's financial stability vanished. Her mother, Anna, stepped into the role of primary provider, taking a job as a receptionist at a funeral parlor. While Anna spent her days surrounded by grief and loss, Anne Margaret sought refuge in music, dance, and performance. Somewhat ironically, despite growing into one of Hollywood's most celebrated beauties, her earliest real opportunities came through radio, where nobody could see her face at all. While still a teenager, she began appearing on programs like Don McNeil's Breakfast Club and Ted Mack's Amateur Hour. Between radio appearances and school musicals, she spent years quietly refining her abilities. Those performances may have seemed modest at the time, but they were laying the foundation for something far greater. Eventually, Anne Margaret joined a singing group called the Subtle Tones, and together they made their way to Las Vegas. They secured a performance slot at the famous Dunes Hotel, sharing a billing with established names like Tony Bennett and Al Hirt. For a young performer still working to establish her reputation, it was an enormous opportunity. Word about the group spread rapidly.
In an unusual move, Fox immediately loaned her out to another studio for her first feature film role. What appeared to be a glamorous debut turned out to be something far more intimidating. She was cast in Pocketful of Miracles alongside Bette Davis, one of the most formidable and commanding figures in Hollywood history. The atmosphere on set was notoriously difficult. Davis and co-star Glenn Ford reportedly had little patience for one another, and the resulting tension hung over the entire production. Crew members later described the environment as filled with stress and barely concealed hostility. For a young newcomer stepping onto a film set for the very first time, it could easily have been overwhelming. But Anne Margaret stayed grounded. Rather than getting swept up in the surrounding chaos, she kept her focus on the work and quietly earned the respect of the people around her. When the film was released, all that effort paid off. Anne Margaret received a Golden Globe for New Star of the Year, officially announcing to Hollywood that she was far more than a promising singer. She had arrived as a genuine film star. Before Elvis entered her life, Anne Margaret found herself navigating a relationship that had grown more serious than she had anticipated.
She was dating a young television producer named Burt Sugarman when he caught her completely off guard by presenting her with a diamond engagement ring. The moment left her stunned. She had not been expecting anything remotely close to a marriage proposal, and the weight of making such a significant life decision pressed heavily on her. After sitting down with her parents and talking everything through carefully, they advised her strongly that she was still far too young to rush into marriage. In the end, Anne Margaret made the difficult decision to return the ring and end the relationship.
Around that same time, her career continued accelerating at an extraordinary pace. During the 1962 Academy Awards ceremony, she took the stage and delivered a memorable performance of the theme from Bachelor in Paradise that energized the entire room. Among the people watching that night was Eddie Fisher, a man whose personal life had already become one of Hollywood's most talked about scandals. Fisher had shocked the public by leaving his wife Debbie Reynolds for her close friend Elizabeth Taylor, and the fallout had dominated headlines for years. Not long after his split from Taylor, Fisher turned his attention toward Anne Margaret and asked her out. Her parents had immediate reservations. Beyond Fisher's reputation as Hollywood's most notorious heartbreaker, there was also a considerable age gap between them. Her family was deeply protective, and they came up with an unconventional solution. During their first several dates, her parents accompanied the couple themselves, turning every outing into a supervised group occasion. It may have felt awkward to some, but for her parents, their daughter's well-being mattered far more than appearances. Anne Margaret soon returned to work at 20th Century Fox for a major new production, the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical State Fair. The project offered her two contrasting roles to audition for: Margie, the sweet and wholesome girl next door, and Emily, the more daring and complicated bad girl. The studio initially believed she was perfectly suited to Margie, and everything about her early audition seemed to confirm their instinct. Then, the producers decided to test her range by asking her to perform the jazz standard Won't You Come Home Bill Bailey, which belonged to Emily's character. The performance changed the entire conversation. Anne Margaret didn't simply sing the song competently. She illuminated the room with an energy the producers hadn't fully anticipated. In that moment, they realized she had layers and depth far beyond simple sweetness. She ultimately landed the role of Emily, demonstrating that she could balance warmth and sensuality with equal conviction.
In many ways, the two roles reflected something genuinely true about her real personality. Offstage, she was naturally quiet, reserved, and somewhat shy. But the moment she stepped in front of an audience, an entirely different side of her emerged. Explosive, playful, and completely impossible to ignore. The filmmakers wanted her physical appearance to reflect that fiery quality as well. Although she would eventually become celebrated for her red hair, Anne Margaret was originally a brunette. The studio felt a bold red hairstyle better matched Emily's spirit, so she made the change for the role. The look became iconic almost immediately and remained central to her image for the rest of her career. Despite starring in major studio productions, her earnings barely reflected her growing fame. Because she had signed her contract with Fox before becoming a star, the terms overwhelmingly favored the studio. Even while headlining a large-scale musical production, she was reportedly earning only $500 a week. Fortunately, acting was not her only avenue to success. Over at RCA Victor, executives had a bold strategy in mind. They intended to market her as the female equivalent of Elvis Presley. As part of that campaign, they even had her record a version of his classic track, Heartbreak Hotel. The gamble worked. Audiences responded enthusiastically. Her second album became a major success, and the Grammy Awards recognized her as Best New Artist, confirming that she had become one of entertainment's most rapidly rising talents.
On New Year's Eve in 1961, director George Sidney found himself seated inside the Sands Hotel and Casino on a date that was struggling to hold his attention. Instead of focusing on the woman across from him, he found himself completely riveted by the performer on stage. That performer was Anne Margaret. Sidney was so struck by her presence and energy that he immediately offered her a role in the upcoming film adaptation of the Broadway musical Bye Bye Birdie. Technically, Anne Margaret was not supposed to be the film's central attraction,
But as production progressed, it became increasingly obvious that the camera adored her. Every scene seemed to come alive the moment she appeared on screen. Even Janet Leigh, already famous for her role in Psycho, reportedly noticed the shift happening around her. According to stories from the set, Leigh grew frustrated by the amount of attention the filmmakers appeared to be directing toward Anne-Margaret, particularly during close-up sequences. Dick Van Dyke had been the breakout star of the Broadway version, and naturally expected the film to showcase him in a similar way. But the moment he arrived on set, he sensed the balance shifting. One account from the production described Van Dyke walking in to find Anne-Margaret seated comfortably in George Sidney's lap. Whether exaggerated or not, the image stayed with him. From that point on, he allegedly believed her role was growing far larger than originally planned. As filming continued, his frustrations reportedly grew alongside it. When the film finally reached theaters, Van Dyke openly joked to friends that it might as well have been called The Anne-Margaret Show. Despite whatever tensions may have existed behind the scenes, the majority of the cast genuinely adored her. Her warmth, humor, and natural charisma made her remarkably easy to work alongside, and many people on set found themselves completely won over by the same magnetic quality that audiences were now beginning to discover.
After filming wrapped on Bye Bye Birdie, director George Sidney remained convinced that he had witnessed something exceptional. He believed her energy represented something audiences rarely encountered on screen, and he was determined to showcase it even further. Sidney went back to the executives at Columbia Pictures and pushed hard for permission to film a special musical sequence built entirely around her. The studio rejected the idea immediately, unwilling to commit additional funds to scenes they considered unnecessary. But Sidney refused to abandon the concept. So convinced was he that Anne-Margaret was becoming a once-in-a-generation talent that he reportedly reached into his own pocket and invested $60,000 of his personal money to make the sequence happen. He even persuaded the film's original songwriters to compose a brand new number tailored specifically to her personality and abilities. By that point, the fascination surrounding her extended far beyond directors and producers. At the film's wrap party, actress Maureen Stapleton reportedly asked Anne-Margaret to sit beside her for the entire evening, explaining with humor that she wanted to stay close because she felt practically everyone else in the room was drawn to her. That kind of attention followed Anne-Margaret everywhere during that period. When Bye Bye Birdie opened at Radio City Music Hall, Life magazine famously observed that her dancing generated more warmth inside the theater than the building's own heating system. As award season arrived, the film earned only a single acting nomination, and it belonged to Anne-Margaret. The Golden Globe Awards recognized her with a nomination for Best Actress in a Musical or Comedy, confirming her status as Hollywood's most exciting new arrival. Her cultural influence soon spread beyond film and music into the world of popular art. Years later, artists working for Marvel Comics reportedly drew inspiration from Anne-Margaret's appearance in Bye Bye Birdie while developing the iconic look of Mary Jane Watson. Her red hair and playful confidence became part of the creative foundation behind one of comic book history's most beloved characters.
While Hollywood was still catching up with her rise, Anne-Margaret's career kept accelerating. She was invited to perform at a birthday celebration for President John F. Kennedy. The event came only a year after Marilyn Monroe had delivered her legendary performance of Happy Birthday, Mr. President, a moment that had instantly embedded itself in American pop culture history. Stepping into that spotlight was no small undertaking, yet Anne-Margaret didn't flinch under the pressure. She leaned fully into the playful and confident energy of the performance, delivering a bold and spirited rendition that commanded the room and confirmed she could hold an audience just as effortlessly as Monroe had.
Around that same time, George Sidney had signed on to direct Elvis Presley in MGM's upcoming musical, Viva Las Vegas, and he was convinced that Anne-Margaret was one of the very few performers in Hollywood capable of matching Elvis's extraordinary screen charisma. The producers were specifically searching for a leading